moments where I just wanted to kind of get through it. I'm still held to the same goal and same standard as the guy next to me. And yet I have these, obstacles. Like, how do we overcome this? So there were moments where I was like, is this really for me? Like, is this really? But honestly, like what pushed me was like, I can do this. I can do this better than all of you. And I will show you how I'm going to do it my way.
Hello, and welcome to Working Your Way, the podcast dedicated to exploring the journey of authenticity in the workplace and discovering how to navigate it your way. I'm your host, Sandhya Sadakar, and today I'm excited to introduce Patricia Alvarez. Patricia has built a remarkable career in the wine and spirits industry as she navigated a male-dominated field and rose through the ranks from distributor sales to leading sales strategy at a startup beverage company. In this episode, Patricia reflects on her journey from breaking into the industry early in her career to the challenges of being one of the very few women and Latinas in the space. Patricia opens up about balancing her identity and values with the demands of corporate culture and how she learned to make her voice heard even when it meant going against the grain. And we also discuss her journey through some life transitions like relocating and taking a career break, and eventually discovering what makes work truly meaningful for her. I'm thrilled to share this story with you and her insights on balancing being adaptable and being authentic and finding what feels right for her. So let's get into it. Okay, welcome to Working Your Way, Patricia. I'm really excited to have you here.
Hey, Sandhya, I'm so thrilled. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you have had a long and successful career. I'm deeming it as successful. We know that can be defined in many ways, but in the kind of alcoholic beverages industry, wine, spirits, and I'm curious to start, how did you find your way to this industry in the first place?
It's funny. I grew up in the business. My family is in the liquor distributor business back in Puerto Rico. And so it was always kind of there. But I went to college and, you go to the career fair and you're 22 and you're like, wine sounds cool. Spirits sound cool. And,
right.
The company had a good training program and I interviewed. I made it through all the rounds and they definitely made me feel seen like a person. So versus some of the other companies are like, we need employee number 437. And so it felt fun and right. And it was, a little bit before the economic crash of '08. So it was a really exciting time and I loved it. I'd never done sales before. And so it was an opportunity to kind of run your own little empire or territory and manage your business, but in a corporate setting. Mm-hmm. And so it gave me a lot of autonomy and just, I learned a lot. And it was very humbling because, you go to college, you get a degree, and then you're like, I work in the back room of a grocery store, like ripping boxes open, shoes, dirt getting spilled on, breaking bottles on accident. So very humbling experience, but I enjoyed it. The last role I did was a brand new job and sort of had a chance to pilot something and kind of build something from scratch. And that made me want more.
When you were talking about going to the career fairs and like being seen as a person, and you took me right back to my, sophomore, junior, senior year of college, right? Deciding what I wanted to do and how these sales jobs were sold as like, you run this little business, right? Which like absolutely was true. So I don't mean that to sound like it was, not real. And I had some of those moments too of like, how did I get here? Where, working for a big company with a big name and a really great job, right, on paper. And then, I found myself in a conference room with like stuffed taxidermy animals like all over the place with like a bunch of, old white guys. And I was like, how did I get here? And you had a similar, like, right, stocking shelves and meeting with people in their office and clearing off like product samples from their desk, right, to like meet with the person that's in charge of inventory. And
it was, so this was 2007. And I remember walking into this distributor and our division had maybe 100 people and there were 10 women, maybe. Mm-hmm. And there was one other guy that identified as Latino and then one other Black guy and me. And I remember
Mm.
thinking like, oh, oh, okay. I grew up in Puerto Rico, then I went to college in the Midwest. So, I purposely like to put myself in situations where like I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to, share. But that was like, okay, I can be one of the guys. Like, and it was a lot of the guys go and golf. So this is what we do. My grandfather, Cuban, he's like, you business is done in the greens, but you got to learn how to play golf. He never did. He never did. So I think he regretted that. And he was like, maybe I would have gotten ahead. And I was like, I'll do it. And,
Mm.
you sort of, tend to kind of do as they do. And sure, it gave me some credibility. I remember going to a golf tournament. It was a team outing, and there were four girls that golfed. All the other girls chose the spot, and I was like, I'm gonna golf. I'm gonna chat with the guys, and it did. It got me some credibility. I remember like one of our vice presidents was like, "Do you golf?" And I was like, "No," but I guess I play the part, or like I don't know.
Yeah.
And they're like, "But you won women's longest drive," and I was like, "Well, I actually didn't hit it the longest or the furthest. I was the only one that stayed on the green. I was like, I follow instructions. Okay. So maybe I didn't hit it the furthest, but I stayed in. And so I got my little gift card. But especially early on in my career, I wanted so much of like prove that I can do this and prove that I
Mm.
belong and prove that I fit in and I'm going to do as the boys do or do as they do. And I don't regret it.
I want to kind of go back to what your grandfather said about, hey, this is where business is done, right? This is the thing. These are the things you have to do.
Yeah.
Like, I missed out on that opportunity, so I want you to have it. And there's so many things that our parents or our grandparents can like pass down to us that in their intention is going to help us or make us safe or, help us get ahead. And sometimes that's not always the best advice, but I'm really curious, especially growing up in the industry, seeing your parents in this industry, what kind of messages did you pick up about work, about career, and your mentality of that going in as like a young person?
Yeah, both of my grandfathers, so on my mom and dad's side, both were immigrants. And so, the one that told me about the green, the Cuban one, they left Cuba, running away from the revolution. And so he lost everything, everything he had, everything he had built. He took his two little kids and his wife, put like one suitcase. And so there was always like a lot of good work ethic there. Like he wouldn't spend a penny. He was just because everything was taken from him, or that was
Yeah.
his investment for freedom, right? And then he worked at a big corporation, worked his way up in sales. And we find out at his funeral that he never enjoyed it. He just did it because he knew it was important for his family. And he did well. He would win like salesman of the year, like multiple years.
Wow.
It was just, this is what he had to do. And he did it well. And he just had a tremendous work ethic because he knew it was what he needed to do for his family. And then on my dad's side, he was sent on a one-way ticket from Spain to Puerto Rico, and he didn't know that. He thought he was going to go visit his brothers who were in business, and they're like, "Nope, you're taking over." And so, what started as like a fish distribution company ended up in other provisions and mostly liquor. But I admire both of them because they were very much like, we have to do what we need to do, whether it's for the family or for, what's important. But they sacrificed a lot, which, I acknowledge and I'm grateful for. But then they had a different perspective of, you got to blend in. When you get there, you got to make sure that you do what you're told or you do as the rest are, because that's how you survive and that's how you thrive. But it was just a totally different experience for them versus for me, where it's like, yeah, we can do both. We have a different perspective to say it's okay for me to challenge a little bit, that I don't have to do that just because that's what everybody else is doing. Um,
Right. Right. The context is totally different
yeah,
and I can relate to that in terms of like, my mom's dad came to the US and didn't know anything, right? Didn't really speak the language and was just trying to kind of make it, right? And every dollar counted and every opportunity counted. And
yeah,
you do not turn down an opportunity for safety or security
correct.
or success, right? And now in my generation, it's like, okay, you built the foundation, a safe structure for me to now take risks and go
Yeah.
off the book and, follow my heart and all those like, wonderful platitudes that really are very meaningful.
it's having the confidence to say, okay, I am well prepared to take on this
Yeah.
challenge.
You mentioned you were one of 10 women in a division of how many?
About 100 people. Yeah.
In this industry that is often very male dominated. And I
Yeah.
had an experience that was similar in the hospitality industry where the chefs and the operators that we were serving were like fun and interesting and creative and progressive. And then the industry that I was a part of that was servicing this really cool progressive side of the business was very much like an old boys club, right? It was very like relationships matter. And oftentimes what that meant was I've known this person more years than you. And so I have a better relationship when that wasn't really the truth. And I came to find that out and prove that that wasn't the case fairly quickly. But like this kind of, the word that's coming to my mind is stodgy. And I don't know that that's totally fair, but that's kind of the way that I describe the industry on the hospitality side. This was specific to what I was doing, but I'm really curious. I want you to talk a little bit about like being a woman in a man's world and a man's industry.
Yeah, especially, when we were those first few years where you're in a grocery store, like in the back room of a grocery store where it's like truck drivers that are delivering and those that are, receiving the product, like a lot of them are men and white men. And so, there were moments where you just kind of I just wanted to kind of get through it. And, like I remember wearing like a fake wedding ring because there was like one of the soda guys would always be like, so when are we getting married? When are we getting married? Like that kind of like innocent, but still harassment. You're like, I'm just
Yeah.
my job, man. Like we don't even work in the same
Yeah.
company. And some of them were cultural differences where they're like, I don't do business with women. Like it's in my culture that I don't. And so I'm like, how am I? I'm still held to the same goal and same standard as the guy next to me. And yet I have these, obstacles. Like, how do we overcome this when, how do I tell this guy, like, I'm your sales rep? I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. So that made it hard because you're leaning on the guys, your friends, and they don't totally get it. And so I missed the cohort. And then there were other women that were there that their work ethic was different, of a different era, let's just say. And so they just had a different set of expectations of what it took to do business, where I was like, I'm not sacrificing my values for
Yeah.
that. So there were moments where I was like, is this really for me? Like, is this really? But honestly, like what pushed me was like, I can do this. I can do this better than all of you. And I will show you how I'm going to do it my way. And there were moments where they put me in a territory that was predominantly Hispanic. So that was a big lever for me to use. And so I
Hmm.
sold better than the guy before me because Pavana spoke Spanish and he and I like, chatted up and he bought from me because of that. And so I'm trying to figure out like, how can I connect? Like, what do I need to connect? And I remember having a buyer who was, gosh, he was a crabby guy. But somehow I figured out that his daughter played volleyball for a local college. And so I was like, hey, I heard that the game, like I heard about the game. Like I just did like a quick search online and that like lit him up because I took an interest in what was important to him, which was his kid, who was like an awesome sports player. So I
Yeah.
that helps sometimes when you're like, okay, like we're humans. They care about something, like how do we get to that? Like at the end of the day, we're just selling boxes. Like it's just, I used to have a boss that she would say, we sell crushed grapes. Nobody's dying on the table. Like this isn't that serious. Like it just, it's boxes of
Yeah.
wine, boxes of booze, but we are in the people business. So how do we engage with people and empathize it? Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they're just other challenges. Maybe they're just crabby because we're all in this grocery store together. Like, I don't know. And
Right.
Mariah Carey has played 40 times this holiday season. Like it just,
Yeah.
how do you meet people where they're at is, I think, what helped me kind of make it through. And then when I left the distributor and went on the supplier side, like it was a totally different set of priorities, different set of, what it takes to win. And I made sure that I always led with facts and figures. And even when, it came to the end of my time there, it was like, here's what we agreed upon. Here are the measures. Here, like, you got to keep it to facts because that's what's going to get you to the end, because that not everybody can rely on charisma. Statistically, women are judged on their past experience versus their future potential. And so
Mm-hmm.
you have to bring those receipts, because those are the unconscious and subconscious biases that play a role. And I learned how to try and, make it as far as I could with that, until a point came where I was like, okay, I'm tired. I want to do something else.
During that time, I mean, I just wonder, in terms of like, of course, sales is all about relationship building, right? And oftentimes that looks like, for someone who isn't like the person that you're selling to, being relatable, right? Being likable, like you said, kind of like, haha, brushing off that comment that frankly is inappropriate and maybe made you a little uncomfortable. And like knowing that, okay, I just need to I need to fit in here, right? I need to blend in with this environment. So what do I need to do? How do I need to act? How do I need to talk, right? What do I need to Google and care about to be that person? And I wonder, for you in those early days, like looking back on it now, how much of that was your savvy, and just being savvy with humans and what they care about and how they operate. And how much of that do you look back on now and feel like, I don't know, for me, I feel like a little bit of sadness for
Yeah.
doing those things, or going outside of like my, true self or my true nature. But what's
Yeah.
that like for you?
Even today, sometimes it's just hard to kind of stop somebody in their tracks and say, you know what, not going to fly, because you're trying to figure out what is worth picking a fight, or what's the cost. And so
Yeah.
thinking about that is already exhausting. And so you're like, I'm just gonna not. I look back at my time, and yeah, there are moments where I wish I would have either stood up for somebody else more. And I think probably do that more than for myself. There, when I think about it, I'm like, oh man, I should have said something when I heard this go down with so and so. But I think, looking back at basically my 20s and even early 30s, I feel for her. I feel for young Patricia, where, all you're trying to do is just adapt, and you're trying to fit in, and you're trying, because that's the advice I was always given. Like, hey,
Totally.
like that's how you survive. And then I was like, but I don't want to just survive. I want to be able to thrive, and I want to be able to stand out. And if this is how the rules are, then I need to find somewhere else to play. And I think that was the realization was, and I don't think I would change anything back then. I think I would probably not take it so personally, or try to like leave the emotions out of it. Cause sometimes you're just like, it's hard. And you just like can't help but not feel the feels, or you can't help but feel it.
Yeah.
That's where I don't know if you can relate to that, where it's like, man, like I learned from it. So I don't regret it, but I also like, oh, it took a while and we're tired and we have a couple extra wrinkles because of it. But I'm grateful.
Patricia mentioned how hard it can be to push back or take a stand or call someone out. And I know that a lot of you listening can probably relate to this. I really wish I had done more of this in my early years too. And what she said about it being harder to do for yourself than for others, I totally felt. It can often be easier, especially as women, to call out injustice or unfairness or just inappropriate behavior when it's in protection of someone else and not ourselves. And I truly do get sad for the younger me that let people get away with bad behavior, or microaggressions, or just lack of respect towards me. And we often think about this in the frame of choosing your battles, weighing the cost and the benefit. Like, if I say something, I will ruin a business relationship, or it's going to upset a client, or even it's going to set me back in my career. So we don't say anything. But we often forget to weigh the cost to us internally. Each time we allow something to happen, it takes an emotional toll on us inside. Each time it kind of feels like a small self-betrayal. And I know that the cost of these small choices that I made for a company or for someone else's comfort or even for my own career advancement added up, and they cost me a lot in my connection to myself and having my own back. Now, this feels kind of heavy now looking back on it, and it's also something I'm super aware of now in my life. And choosing myself when I'm at a crossroads of choosing someone else's comfort or taking a stand for my own connection to myself and my needs. Okay, let's get back to the conversation and hear about what moved Patricia to make the best choice for herself and leave her job. I think this is part of the human experience, right? Like we can look back at stuff and recognize that there was some value in that. And we can recognize that like there were some things that were not okay. And all of it is just, it just exists, right? It all exists together. And I think it's fine to say that, you know, we are where we are because of all the things that we went through and learned and created and built. And like, okay, I wouldn't have done it differently because I don't know, you know, anything other than who I am today. And like, I still feel a little bit sad for every time that I thought about the cost to the business over the cost to myself.
Yeah. And that was the big thing was, you know, do I stand up for what is right, but I know what's going to cost me? And, you know, towards the end of my time in corporate, like I can pinpoint to, you know, some moments where I was like, ooh, I stood up for myself in this particular situation. 2 months later, that cost me a promotion because I said, you know, this isn't right. And, you know, I challenged an authority figure that basically said, you know, listen, again, don't regret that moment at all. But I can mark that as like, that's when things changed for me because I stood up for myself because I thought if I don't stand up for myself, then nobody else is going to be able to do that.
What do you think was the like tipping point or the catalyst to like, okay, I've played this game for this long and I've got the results to show for like why I deserve to be here, right? Yeah. But this time I'm going to say something. Like what do you think it was for you that made you decide differently?
I wanted to feel comfortable and safe and just safe to be able to express myself, say what I have to say, challenge the right people with respect without it costing. And so when you see little bits and pieces of like, oh, well, we expressed ourselves here and then we're told, don't worry about it. Or we're told, give it a few more months. Or, you know, after a while, you're just like, I don't believe that there is trust or safety in if I were to have to, you know, bring up a bigger issue later on. I think that's like when people say, oh, toxic environments, like it's, you know, some folks picture like physical abuse or verbal abuse, or sometimes it's just, I just don't feel safe expressing myself, saying, challenging, you know, and if we're going to be in a world where it's like, you do as I say, you know, because I said so, like, we don't even parent that way anymore. Like, I don't tell my kids because I said so. Like, I say, well, here is the reason behind why, you know, this is for me to keep you safe, and here's why we do it. Versus we grew up with like, because I said no, or because I told you so. And you're like, that's not good enough anymore. And so I think how do we do that with our team, with our leaders, with our direct reports to say, hey, I want you to understand kind of where we're coming from. And a lot of that goes back to transparency and clarity. You don't have to reveal everything. You don't have to say like, here are all the company secrets or the path for the next 10 years, but just, hey, here's what we're thinking, or here's how we see this. What is your take? Like, make it a two-way conversation, because a lot of times it was like, keep your head down, trust the system. And you're like, but I don't trust the system. So like, help me have some confidence in that system. Yeah. And so when you don't share any of that, then I don't know what my future here is. And so I think that's where things changed was, okay, I don't trust that I'm going to get the transparency. And I tell everybody this, like, don't leave until all of your questions are asked, that you have laid out, here's what I'm thinking, that you give people proper timelines, because if you just bounce and You didn't give anybody an opportunity to actually do some work. Like we have to have those uncomfortable conversations and say, hey, here's where I'm at. What do you think? Like you're the leader. Like how do we get there? How do I get there together? And then lay out a plan and then revisit the plan and say, hey, we talked about that. Here's where we are. What are your thoughts? And even if you get there and you're like, this is not what I thought it would be, or this is not the growth I thought I was going to get, like it's okay to say, maybe this isn't for me.
I want to just talk for a second. What you mentioned about not kind of getting the answers or, getting the peek behind the curtain to the bigger vision, or not even having kind of that trust or safety. I think for me, it brought up this idea of like a company can ask you to do everything for them and then say they value you, and you're doing great and you're getting these great results, and like still only kind of let you in 10%, right? It's like we want 100% of you and we're only going to kind of give you 10%. And I kind of felt that in what you were talking a little bit too about, like, you're telling me I'm doing great and you're not giving me the context of what's going on here. I don't think I'm saying this very clearly, but it's like, it felt very imbalanced as you were talking about it, right? And that you were starting to see that imbalance.
Yeah, no, I mean it's almost like you were in my exit interview. I basically said, when I look back at anytime there was a call, I said, I'll do it. Yeah, sign me up. And like they tell you these things. Hey, these are investments, right? When you take this opportunity, when you relocate here, when you do this side project or leadership role or mentor or recruit, like you do all these extra things beyond my sales job. You think this is you I genuinely did it because I loved it. I did a lot of different work outside of my job for the company because I genuinely enjoyed it. It helped me build community, and I was involved in ERGs and recruiting and mentoring. Like I did so much stuff that I truly enjoyed. But at some point you thought, these are chips I can cash in, right? Like when are they? And it felt like they were losing their value. They were losing, like, I don't know if they're worth anymore because I wasn't seeing it. And yet
wow.
I was seeing those that didn't do any of that. And yet that, like, how does that not count for something? So I think a lot of that came back to the transparency. And it's like, corporations don't owe us anything, right? But like, hey, if I've done all of this and I bring it to you to say, hey, how does this benefit? Let's build a plan and say, hey, let's go down this path, or when you only tell somebody, keep doing what you're doing, but what I've been doing isn't getting me what I'm asking, then either you're not providing good guidance or I'm on a hamster wheel. Transparency is key. I think people just want to know kind of what's up. Like, you don't have to reveal everything, but hey, where do I stand? Like, why are people having such a hard time with giving feedback, giving and taking it? That to me is, how do we help our leaders be better prepared to give feedback that eventually will tie back to this plan building, to the here's how I bring value, here's what I'm working on, here are my opportunities that I'm helping develop. And feedback is, and you said this in one of your episodes with Natasha, who introduced us. Natasha said, feedback is a gift and not everybody's a good gift giver. So that's important too. But we also need to ask too, like, hey, how am I doing? Because I think we're scared to ask that too.
I think you're absolutely right. One, I think we're sometimes asked, or we're scared to ask, how am I doing? Or you said you were going to, give me this for this effort I've put in, and you haven't. And we might be afraid to ask because we don't want to hear the answer.
Yeah.
And I think with leaders, which, to be fair, like, we should hear the answer and then we can then make a different choice, right? But like, that sometimes is even scarier than saying, I want to hold out hope that like this is going to happen for me, instead of thinking about this enormous, scary thing of like finding another job, or figuring out what's next. And so you did take some time off. Well, I'm going to use big air quotes around time off, because when you made this transition out of this company, your family was relocating, you were selling a house, buying a house, like figuring
Crazy.
out kids stuff, and took a lot of time to really invest in yourself and learn yourself. And you mentioned some things about networking. So I want to talk about that time. Did you have a specific intention going into that time of what you wanted to do with it?
What I wanted to do was try to figure out what is next in the professional book. Like, what does the next chapter look like? Because I knew that I didn't want to just do the same job for another alcohol
Different company,
Yeah.
same title. Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't, I would like, you might as well just stay. But I wanted radical change. And I had a friend that said to me, she's like, you've had a 16-year career in this industry and you could do that 2 more times in your lifetime. And I'm like, that's so true, right? Like I'm 39 today. So that was inspiring to say, I could make the next 5, 10 years something totally different. And so what I learned was I asked feedback and questions. I thought I wanted to go totally, totally out of I was like, I'm done with alcohol. Let's see something different. And then I went a little too far out. And every time I interviewed or I met folks, like I would get similar feedback. Like, we like you. We're having a hard time figuring out where to place you. And also like, it feels like kind of like too radical. And I thought it was hard to hear. It was hard to hear because I'm like, what do you mean? I have 16 years of experience. Like what? Like, I'm good. I'm a figure it out kind of person. But, they don't know that. They don't know me. And
I'm super capable, even
yeah,
if I don't have that exact title on my resume, right? That could be a super frustrating thing. I went through similar.
yeah, yeah. But you're like,
Yeah.
every interview I went on, I asked for feedback. And there was one that was really awesome. Like the way that they like prepped me for the interview and then called me to tell me that it was down to me another candidate didn't get it. But like even the way that they broke the news was just really amazing and humanizing. And they were like, would you be open to the feedback? Like I didn't even have to ask. They were like, if you don't want it, that's fine. And I said, yes, give it to me. And then every other, whether it's meeting somebody new or interviewing, I was like, how did this go? How do you think this went? How did what came across? And I had people be grateful. They were like, thank you so much. Like that's so like wonderful that you ask. And, Adam Grant says, don't ask for feedback. Ask what's one thing that you would change about whether it's a presentation I gave or something, and you'll get more concrete, more specific. And so I would ask that. I'm like, what's one thing I can work on? Or one thing that you think I can take away from this? And that was incredibly helpful. And then just cold calling. I like if I would listen to a podcast and I thought the conversation was interesting, I would send people a message on LinkedIn. I'm like, I heard you on this podcast. Like, I thought you were interesting. Do you want to get coffee? And like some people never replied. Some guy like took months and then now we meet like every quarter. There was another guy who was just like doing some very interesting like things with like kegged cocktails. And I was like, can I like just listen to you talk? Like your brain is just, and we ended up finding out that we live near each other. Like that has been awesome because I'm not one to, I don't love a big room network. Like any industry meeting we go to, I'm like, oh, there are going to be 800 people here. Like I want to find my 3 friends, sit in a corner and just not move from that corner because I value like quality friendships. But I saw networking as an opportunity to expand my network. I'm like, I'm new in the city. I don't have a job or a corporate company that I can lean on, but I do have this industry that I can kind of like, all right, that's my in. I'm like, hey, alcohol business. And I've met some really awesome and wonderful business owners here that I don't think I ever would have because I wouldn't have had the time or the motivation to go out. But then I'm also doing that with the kids from like the kids' families from my kids' school. Like I'm getting to know a lot of these parents and, like tell, so and so like wants to do soccer. Okay, tell me what like clubs we should join or like where can the kids play like hockey, like open skate. Like so I'm doing that already in my personal life as well. So everything was kind of I'm already like reinventing who I am, who we are. We're settling into this new place. Like why not also just throw the professional card up and just say, let's network. I'm not afraid to stretch myself. And like now I'm more secure in who I am authentically and like what I can actually do. Because one thing is to say, screw it, we'll figure it out. Like, I don't know anything about production. So like I can't say, yeah, we'll figure it out. Like I'm sure I probably could, but I'm like, I might tap in some resources for that. Like I wouldn't do that alone. But there are other areas that I'm like, all right, we'll see. We'll find out. Like so much of it is like, I know who to call to help me with this, or I know where to
Yeah.
go to try. And then those are the levers that have helped me during this journey and just keeping that network active. I was just talking about this with my coach. She's like, continue fostering the network, and just because they'll introduce you to other people, and you know that's where I think the future for me is. It's like I'm glad that I've had a chance to just meet a whole new different network and force and expanded beyond that. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here if it weren't for that, right? Like you know, meeting you and like doing this. So just
Yeah.
putting yourself out there and how to remain authentic, but also like go with the flow where you can is important too, I think.
I want to talk about the value of building an authentic network. And really, what I mean by this is finding your people. Now, this is especially important if you're exploring new career possibilities or looking for a new role or wanting to find mentorship and support. But let's be honest, this is important just to live a good, meaningful life in general. Now, Patricia had this need. She had left her job and she moved across the country, and now she wanted to explore what was next for her. So she sought out people who were in her industry doing cool things or finding people that she found inspiring, like connecting with someone that she heard on a podcast. And she really dove headfirst into building community in her new city of Boston. Now, I'm not going to do a segment here on networking. Frankly, that word kind of makes me cringe, but I do want to stress how important it is to surround yourself with people who make you better, who support you when you need it, and who push you to be your best. So, how do you know when you've found your people? I want you to reflect on that question in your own life, and I'm going to come back to this topic in the wrap up. But for now, let's go back into the conversation where Patricia shares more about the self-exploration that she did during her time away from work. When you talked about your time off, you had mentioned like, okay, interviewing for things that were like far off from what was on your resume, which by the way, I did too. And I totally get like, it's like, oh, it's really frustrating and amazing how you asked for feedback, right? So you're learning some things along the way there. You're networking with tons of people in the industry, building these connections, learning about different parts of the industry and maybe getting an idea of what you're interested in. How did you or what helped you kind of capture what you're really amazing at? Was there reflection that you did there? How did you come to a point of like, this is what I have to contribute?
I didn't realize how much of a connector I was, like bringing people together. And I have flashbacks. I have a friend in college that was like, Pats knew everybody in college. Like she would even talk to like the star quarterback. And I was like, I just met people. I don't know. Like I was, you know, I was in with the Latino group because, you know, from Puerto Rico, but then I was also like in with the Americans because those are all my dorm mates. Like I just had a way of like infiltrating groups, despite the fact that I told you I am a social introvert. Like I don't just like go out, but I look back at my career in corporate and even now, like the people that I'm meeting, I'm cementing and fomenting those relationships. And my therapist asked me to do this activity. She goes, ask your friends, like people that you value, what they think your top 3 strengths are. Don't tell them what you think yours are. And it was a beautiful activity, I got to tell you, because what I thought was like, oh, I'm adaptable, I'm a connector, I'm dependable. And then my friends are like, you're loyal, you are like a great communicator, an unbelievable listener, but even better communicator. Like the things that people said, I'm like, that sounds better than dependable, you know? Like, so I honestly like ask your friends to build your resume for you because they're going to tell you like how you're better at that. And so there were days where I was like, oh man, these interviews are not landing and I went back to that network that my board of directors, as my friend Meg says.
Yeah.
Who's on your board of directors? And that reminder was like, okay, this is why it's important to foment a strong network, like of people that you trust and respect. So not just anybody, but people that you're like, okay, I value your words. I value it. I'm going to listen to it and I'm going to take the feedback, positive or negative, and really like they kept me going. And that also made me realize like, oh man, maybe I got something here with like, maybe what I think my strengths are spot on. And so it's okay to say, I know what I'm good at and here's what it is. And then verify with your friends because they'll probably agree with you. Or they'll give you some that you're like, didn't even realize that that was a thing. And I had somebody tell me, you're loyal, you're dedicated, you don't compromise your values for anything. And they go, which is probably why you didn't make it in corporate. And the way that when he said that, I was like, you're right. Like he gave me my strengths and then realized like why I wasn't growing in the company that I was. And I was like, oh damn. like I just asked you to give me my strengths, but you just totally like brought it back in a full analysis and it was awesome. So I'm very big on like, hey, I value your opinion. What do you think? Like Sonia, I will ask you after this, how do you think this went? So.
And I mean, I think it's really cool too that like your friend said that and shared that with you because in my mind, I was like, you knew this the whole time. Why didn't you just tell me 10 years ago? You know? But also I am a big believer in having the people that know us best reflect back to us what they see. It is a beautiful experience. I'm so glad that you did that. I love that Patricia got this nudge from her therapist to survey her closest people to build awareness about her strengths. This is something I am such an advocate for. I do this exercise with my career coaching clients, and I will tell anyone and everyone how amazing it is to do this. I personally got so much insight about myself from doing just this. I had this experience informally when I was traveling on my sabbatical, and the strangers that I had met just a week before were able to see things that I was doing that they really valued and share that back with me. And I also did this exercise formally in my master's program through something called the Reflected Best Self exercise. And now that's one that I use with my clients. The thing is, these superpowers, these innate talents, these inherent strengths, whatever you want to call them, when they're really your thing, they oftentimes are kind of effortless for you. And so because of that, you just do them and you don't really even think about it. And so we don't recognize them as strengths. They're just things that we do. And oftentimes we assume that everybody does things like we do them effortlessly. So this is why it's so important to call in others to serve as a mirror for us and show us what we can't see in ourselves. As Patricia put it, let your friends build your resume. Now, in episode 24 of this podcast, my guest Kat and I talk about this in a lot more depth in a conversation about personal branding and knowing ourselves. So if you want to go deeper, definitely check out that episode.
The kudos to Laura. Therapy and executive coaching are two really great things hand in hand that when I first left, I was like, I know I'm going to invest in it, but I didn't know how or how to find it. And I didn't start therapy until February. And so, it had been 6 months. Everybody, my husband, my kids, everybody was settled. We were in the house. And I was just like, wow, I thought I'd be in a different professional place. And I was like, maybe, I need to do a full reset. And I said, I want to take care. So in January, I did all the, you're in a new city, you're like, new dentist, new like OB, like all the stuff. And I was like, why don't I just like, check my soul, check my heart. And so met this awesome person and, we clicked right away. So I know it doesn't happen like that for everybody, and then I decided I needed to be physically active. So I joined the gym, which I'd never joined the gym before. And all of a sudden, like I drop off the kids at school and I go work out and I do a sauna and I meditate in the sauna, which I'd never meditated before, but I'm like, that all of a sudden is like giving me a new sense of purpose and reflection. And then 3 weeks after that, I started at the startup. So all of it kind of happened at the same time. And then last week, I started with a friend from my old company. She does coaching, and I was like, hey, do you want to like make this official? And she's like, oh, I won't charge you. I'm like, I'm going to pay for the services. Friends don't let friends not pay full price. Like, this is what you do. This is what you're good at. And like, you're going to invest time. Like, I should pay for the service. And it was great because it was a different perspective on, hey, here's, what does future Patricia look like? What are you getting out of this experience? And how do we
Yeah.
apply the past and the current for the future? And it feels very full circle for me right now because I am grateful for it all. Like I have no regrets. I do have stories that maybe for another podcast that we can talk about some like eye-opening stories that I went through, but for the most part, like I am who I am today because of what I got from that experience, from the time off and from my time on right now because I've realized like how far I can push things.
So as you're moving into this next chapter of your career, right? You're in it, working for a startup, running sales and strategy for an emerging brand. What does showing up authentically look like to you right now?
So showing authentically is being able to say what I don't know. So being able to say, it's okay for me to say, I don't have an answer for this, or I don't know how to do this. And it's okay to say that and say, but here's where I think I can go figure it out. What do you think? So, I have somebody that I can bounce this off of, but I think before I was scared to show weakness or show, well, you don't have it together. Like you gotta, and now it's okay. Like for me, that's authenticity to say, here's how I think we should approach this, or I'm not actually sure, like it's okay to get that feedback. And maybe you get it and you're like, I don't know if I agree or this doesn't feel good. Like, let me find another source or let me just trust my gut. I think that for me is what being authentic looks like. And honestly, like anytime there's either an issue or miscommunication, pick up the phone. That for me is authenticity. It's like I don't want to like, oh, well maybe like send an email, like let's just like address it head on, be like, hey, this situation happened, like what does support look like? Or what does fixing it look like? That to me is authenticity because resentment happens when expectations are set, but not all parties are informed of a change in that expectation. That's all people want. It's just being kept in the loop. Whether you're managing your business, a client, a direct report, the senior leader, like people just want to know what's up, like where am I at? So set the proper expectations, hold people to them, check in on them, and avoid the resentment because resent is hard and it's ugly and it's poisonous. It carries out. A resentful person will infect others. And it's best addressed. And I think that's where for me where I'm like showing authenticity is like let's just be open and transparent.
Yeah, I think there's a really great author that she talks about emotions are data, not directives. And in some of the work that I do around personality development and behaviors and things like that, it's like, what are those indicators that something is off, right? And for you, what you just mentioned was like that feeling of resentment means there's something that either isn't transparent, maybe there's an imbalance, maybe I'm giving more than I feel like I'm getting, right? And so how do we like use those emotions as indicators if something is off? And, there's other things like anger. Anger can be an indicator of, my autonomy is being threatened or my boundaries being crossed or, and so like if we can start to, I think it requires us to slow down enough to experience those things and name them and then like kind of identify what's coming from them. But I love what you said about, transparency and how it was such a part of your story before. And now it's like, this is something I really value in a work environment. And talking about being able to say, I don't know. That's not my wheelhouse. Like, I'll find someone to do it, right? I hear you bringing in your connector there. You can find a resource for it. And I think, personally, the reflection that you did and like getting really firm in what you're really good at and I think this is true for a lot of people, helps you be okay with the things that you're not.
Yes, totally. Because you're remaining authentic, right? Because I'm not trying to pretend like I know this or like, hey, and maybe I could get there, or maybe just like this is not going to be something I'm going to dominate or I'm going to be good at. It's okay. But I think that's where like you can't be authentic if you're not open. And it's hard because you need to feel safe to be open because somebody could use that against you later. So it all kind of ties back together, but like all I can do is say, hey, I am who I am. Here's what I bring, right? Here's what I think my value is. Here's what I think I'm good at. These are the expectations I want to set. And that's all I can control.
So tell me a little bit about what works for you in your current job. Like, what is it about the environment, I'm going to say team. You have a couple, you have
Yes.
a small team, but you have
Very
a
small.
team. What is it about the environment, the team, the type of work you're doing that is enabling you to really thrive in what you're doing right now?
I didn't realize like how great of a foundation I had until I put the work into practice, and I was like, oh, I like I bring some skills, man, or like some knowledge that was just part of the foundation. So I'm grateful for that. I have a boss that he's trusting, but he's also confident. And I said yes the second time. I said yes to working for him because he had a certain set of skills that I didn't have. And then I have a certain set of skills that benefit him and the brand. And our brand targets a totally different generation than the one I'm in. So it's humbling for me to say, I remember we had a marketing campaign. I was like, I don't get that, but I don't need to get it. If it tested with our audience and they like it and it slaps for them, I total boomer sounding right now, but like it, that to me is like,
which you're not, by the way. You're probably a millennial, but yes, I get it.
I'm a geriatric millennial. It's okay, but like that's also been like, hey, I trust, but he also trusts in my abilities, and he's like, what do you need, and I'm gonna let you figure it out. So I feel empowered, and that I think is what helps. And he and I don't always see everything eye to eye, but it's good. It's good because, it helps both of us be like, well, why do I see it this way? And should I change? Or it's okay if we both see it differently and we're just going to proceed here? Or, that actually, that made me look at it in a different light. So I think that I feel empowered. And I'm also like doing things that like, I mean, my brand was in 5 states 8 months ago, and it's soon to be 24 states next week. So like, that's all of a sudden I'm like, oh, we did that. We did that together, like, and it's easier in the startup world to see like tangible results because it's fast and it's immediate and you do everything. So that's been a different level of reward just by the nature of the speed. And so I'm glad that I've gotten this exposure just because it's a totally different. And honestly, what helped me say yes to this was in one of the interviews I did, somebody said, but you come from big corporate. Can you do small? Can you do no resources? Can you do like very like, and I remember I was like, yes, this is why I left, because I want to do this. And they're like, yeah, but can you? And I remember thinking, fair enough to have that concern. And now I can say, yeah, very few resources, a mighty team of 2. We have a couple agencies that help us with, national accounts and marketing and some other things. But for the most part, like, and it's, now I look back and I'm like, I can go back to that interview and say, hell yeah, I can do small. I can do no resources. Like, like it's that helps me go too, because it's like, I know that regardless of what happens with this brand, I have high hopes for it. I have even higher hopes for what like the foundation, like the adding to the foundation of what is Patricia Alvarez de Fallon on like what my professional scope looks like. So yeah, that's what keeps me going is the empowerment and all right, know your strengths, play them, like, let's go.
It's so cool. I just see like you recognized how much you do, right? I think you always knew that you delivered amazing results, and that's something that you've done your whole career. And now it's like, oh, I know more than I even thought that I did. And you're delivering these really great results but like the value is so clear. The value to the company, the value to your career, the value to, whoever maybe buys the company down the road. And like, I do think that you've always been able to deliver, and now it feels like that is seen in a different way.
That you just said that. I feel seen. And I even realized it in one of the interviews I did where the company was like, I interviewed for a job that I knew wasn't like the job I wanted, but I really liked this company. And I went in, and before I could even say it, I'm like, hey, I'm coming in to interview for this job. And then hopefully in a few months, like we grow it and here's some ideas. She goes, you're bigger than this job, but I like what you bring. And, unfortunately it didn't work out, but like I remember telling her, I was like, you just made me feel really seen because I knew that. And I came in, and before I even told you, you said that. So that was like the first glimpse of like, ooh, this, like, thank you. And so now if I don't have that feeling, then I don't want to do it. I don't want to interact. I don't want to. And that's what, like, I feel seen. And my, not just leadership, but even one of my distributor partners yesterday, like they're going through a transition, and I was like, here was my experience when it happened to me and my distributor in Chicago. And he's like, I really appreciate your perspective. And I thought, oh, I didn't expect that. I thought we were just chatting about like, new distribution or whatever, and it turned into like a more meaningful conversation. And he felt seen, which made me feel even more seen because I see him and he sees me. And I was like, let's go. Like, I want to keep it going and pay it forward. And that's what I've loved so much about this experience, is that's because it's just the two of us. We touch so much. I have such like a direct interaction with so many of our partners that I am directly benefiting, and it's filling the cup. It really is. It's more coming in than going out, which is not what I felt before. So I'm grateful.
Now, I know you said you started working with the coach, but like maybe it's in that realm, maybe it's in a totally different realm. What is next for you in terms of how you want to grow?
I love the connecting aspect of things. I really love coaching. Like I'm not trained. I'm not like, I don't have any certifications, but anytime somebody calls me and says, hey, can I pick your brain? Or what do you think about this? Like when somebody starts with, what do you think about this? I'm like, let's go. Like I love a good, let's break it down session. So if I can do something with that energy, and it sounds kind of cliche to like, oh, we built a brand and made it big and now we're moving on and I'm going to go consult. Like it sounds a little cliche to me, but somebody's like, no, but you have the corporate expertise, you have the startup expertise. Like, why wouldn't you want to help break it down with people? So I like that would be like awesome. I love a problem that needs dissecting, and then how do we figure it out, and let's work through it together. That to me is like the strategy side of my title is what I love the most. I'm good at sales. I can close the deal. But in the, hey, let's break down a problem. Let's like figure out the why. Oh, that's what fuels me, which is why I love doing the employee resource group work, which is why I really enjoy chatting with friends from the industry, from life, and just I'm hoping that that's where things go. But I've had one session with my executive coach, so we'll see like what it's hopefully like she goes, this is a 6 to 24 month plan, and I said, yes, indeed. Like this is not for tomorrow. So the hope is to like, how do we build on, hey, let's make sure we're maximizing this experience right now so we don't have to wait 16 years to like appreciate everything that we can get out of it, and then be more purposeful. Like, how do I think ahead of like, okay, what should I seek out from my current role that will add to this foundation? And I think that's where the purposeful work with a coach who's going to push you and hold you accountable. She said, next time we talk, I want to hear about this. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I gotta, like, if she's keeping me accountable, right? We're setting expectations. She's like, let's do this. And I'm excited for that. And it's also, she's a friend and I trust her and she's very skilled at this. So why would I not, go? Because that is therapy and coaching. Like, if there's no trust, like you're wasting your time. And like you really got to connect with someone. And I ended up going with somebody that I can know and trust. And I'm grateful for her because it's ultimately going to give my full life meaning and more purpose. And I just, yeah, we're on this earth for not very long. So let's just like go maximize it.
Yeah. Well, I think having your team, right, of people, advocates, supporters, right, people that are there to help you find that time to reflect and to make meaning and to plan and to have accountability. I have said before, like, if I had a magic wand, everybody on this planet would have a coach and a therapist because we need that. And we can make the most out of this one lifetime that we have to live if we make the time to reflect and be intentional and all of those things. So,
yeah, intentional is the key word because now it's hard and they help you put yourself out there and it helps you stay true to who you are and then what's important and then tie it back to your values because, that'll give more meaning because you're like, hey, this is what I'm about and this is what I'm good at. This is what I want to maximize and this is what I want to work on. And so I'm with you. I just think ultimately it benefits everybody, me professionally and personally, and then it's going to benefit, my team and my brand and, my future professional person. So whatever she looks like. So
she's gorgeous. Let me tell you.
That is true. That is true. She rocks the cute bob, probably still.
Undisputed. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on, sharing your story, your journey.
Thank you for helping me reflect. It's some up and down moments in the reflection, but it's healthy, and I'm grateful that Natasha brought us together, and because I feel like I have a friend a new friend add to the network. So Sonia, keep doing what you're doing. I love these podcasts. So all the conversations are just awesome, and I'm so honored to be one of them.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm honored to hear that. Okay, we covered a lot of ground in this conversation. From surviving in an industry where we have to play someone else's game to eventually choosing ourselves. We talked about transitioning from corporate to startup and taking time away from your career and also reconnecting with yourself mid-career to figure out who you really are and what you're really good at. Now, one of the things that Patricia discovered about herself was that she was kind of this super connector. And this had been something that people knew about her even before she realized it herself. Earlier in the episode, I talked about how important it is to build an authentic network, or in essence, finding your people. And there are a lot of resources out there in the business world about networking. And so I'm not going to talk about that here, but instead, I want to talk about how to identify the type of people who will be amazing supporters in your life and the type of people who will come into your life and make you better. They say we're the average of the 5 closest people in your life. So I want you to think about what the average of those 5 people is for you. Do they lift you up? So when it comes to finding your people, and this goes beyond those kind of core 5, this is really relevant for romantic partners, friends, but mentors, coaches, and therapists, and even people that you might work with or work for on job interviews. And here's the thing. This is actually all about turning inward. And I know that seems counterintuitive, but I want you to pay attention to your energy when you're around people. Actually love this tool that I got from a book about dating. It's a book called How to Not Die Alone, which is super inspiring for anyone in the dating world. But even if you're married or partnered, you can apply this idea to anyone in your life. The author of this book, Logan Ury, created a post-date 8, which is 8 questions that you should ask yourself after a date. Instead of, if you're a woman dating men, instead of thinking, did he like me? You actually ask yourself things like, what side of me did they bring out? Or after the date, did I feel energized or drained? So when you think about the people in your life, when you are identifying who are your people, I want you to pay attention to how you feel around them. So here are a couple of questions to ask yourself. How do you feel around them? What impact do they have on you? Do they inspire you? Do they bring out the best in you? Do they motivate you to follow your heart or your dreams? And do they make you feel seen? Okay, I want you to go out there and pay attention to how you feel around the people in your life and use this tool when you meet new people that you might want to build a stronger connection with.